Welcome into the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. I told you I had a surprise for you today. It's kind of a neat little Easter treat at the end of Easter week. And we're going to amaze you, astound you, maybe even scare you a little bit today. But we're also going to tell you about a wonderful event that we told you about last year that I didn't get a chance to get out to last year. And that's mainly my fault because I had a little bit of a foot issue that keeps me from going out in the woods. I'm excited to tell you about this event this year, though, and who knows, maybe I'll be healthy enough to sneak in and make an appearance at the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Camping Adventure, which takes place August 22nd and 22nd and 23rd this year. Our good friend Eric Altman is formerly of Monster Watch. I shouldn't say formerly because, by gosh, I'm going to get him back here to do a few Monster Watch segments here on Darkness Radio. I don't even know if he knows that, but I'm telling him right now, I'm going to get him back here to do a few of those segments on Supernatural News. The Pennsylvania Bigfoot Camping Adventure takes place August 22nd and 23rd. And man, I tell you, Eric has a way of pulling together some of the best speakers in the business when it comes to this particular event. And we have one of them with us today. Stan Gordon has been gracious enough to come onto the program today and not only tell us, I can't wait to get some of these stories out of Stan today, to come onto the program today and talk to us a little bit about some of the things that are going on in Pennsylvania. He has a book out there right now that we'll talk a little bit about today. Creepy Cryptids and Strange UFO Encounters in Pennsylvania, Bigfoot, Thunderbirds, Mysteries of the Chestnut Ridge, and more. In case you're not aware of Stan Gordon, and I think you probably have to have been living under a rock for, decades if you don't know about Stan Gordon. Stan is one of the authorities out there on both UFO and cryptids. And by gosh, I'll tell you, is one of the headliners of this event coming up in Pennsylvania. Stan Gordon was trained as an electronics technician. He specialized in radio communications. He worked in the advanced consumer electronics sales field for over 40 years. Stan's been researching UFO sightings, Bigfoot encounters, and other mysterious events in Pennsylvania since 1959. Since then, he's been involved with the investigation of thousands of unusual incidents. For many years, Stan's led teams of scientists, engineers, and research specialists to investigate mysterious occurrences across Pennsylvania. He's the primary investigator of the 1965 UFO crash incident that occurred near Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. Stan's been taking calls on UFO sightings and other strange reports from the public since 1969, and he continues to receive unusual reports on a regular basis. He's given illustrated lectures both locally and nationally on the topics of UFOs, Bigfoots, cryptids, and strange encounters since the late 1960s. Now, Stan is a former Pennsylvania state director of MUFON, or the Mutual UFO Network, and was its first recipient in 1987 of the MUFON Meritorious Achievement in a UFO Investigation Award. I want to make sure I stick to the landing on that, folks. I've been up since 3 a.m., so you gotta forgive me. He was listed in the 2005 Fate magazine special, The 100 Most Influential People in Ufology Today. And again, I want to give Stan his props here and make sure I give him the proper introduction here. He is the producer of the award-winning UFO video documentary Kecksburg, The Untold Story. Stan is the author of 4 books: Silent Invasion, the Pennsylvania UFO Bigfoot Casebook, Really Mysterious Pennsylvania, and Astonishing Encounters, Pennsylvania's Unknown Creatures, and Stan's 4th book, which again we'll talk a little bit about tonight, Creepy Cryptids and Strange UFO Encounters of Pennsylvania. These books available on Amazon.com. We'll have a link in the description of this program, and I want you to go over and, by all means, pick up some of these books. I want to welcome in not only Eric Altman, but Stan Gordon to the program. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here on Darkness Radio tonight.
Thanks for having us on, Tim. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, Tim. Long time no talk.
Yeah, not on purpose, brother. Not on purpose. I assure you.
It's all good. You've been out chasing giant hairy beavers again, huh?
Yes. The long-running joke returns to Darkness Radio. We've been... Actually, you know what? That actually ended up becoming a running joke yet again when, I don't know if you realize this or not, but Wisconsin doesn't want beavers running around in their town. Chicago loves the beaver, by the way. I don't know if you know this or not, but there's a giant beaver running around in Chicago, and they want to name it. But Wisconsin doesn't want a Buc-ee's, so we ended up turning that into a big joke.
I got to move to Chicago.
Right? They were trying to name the giant beaver in Chicago on the news. So you gotta love that. I mean,
I won't comment.
Right.
Oh goodness,
Stan, I have to ask you: is a giant beaver even fall under cryptid, or is that just people wanting to go too far with the thing?
Well, you just never know. You just never know what the next call is going to be about.
I think sometimes we take things a little too far, and when we get to giant beavers, I think we're kind of stretching it, right? I think that's one of those things out in the wild where we just go, okay, that's a big beaver, and we can kind of chuckle about it and put it aside. But
if you remember, Tim, that was an actual news story on Monster Watch.
It was
Actual news story that I read about the giant hairy beaver.
It was, but it was hysterical, and it was. I mean, you were right in the pocket that night, so that was fun.
Yes, yeah. It was good times.
It was, and hey, anytime there's a giant beaver story, I pull it because it's good. It's good comedy. So
puts a smile on your face.
It does. I've got one. See, I've got one right now. It never fails. I am a third grader at heart, my friend. I'm just saying. Let's first talk about this Bigfoot camping adventure. Holy cow, Eric. Man, I'm telling you, you either got blackmail on each one of these guests that's coming in, or you've acquired a lot of friends over your lifetime that have a powerful resume. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate and very blessed to know a lot of people in the Bigfoot community. I've been doing this for, goodness, I've been studying the phenomenon for over almost 45 years now, and I've been actively investigating for going on 29 years. And over those years, I've got the opportunity to speak at dozens upon dozens upon dozens of conferences, made a lot of friends in the paranormal community, the UFO community, the Bigfoot community. So, all I have to do is put a quick message out there on Facebook and say, "Hey, Lyle, how you doing, buddy? You want to come speak at my event?" "Sure." And we work it out. "Hey, Dr. Meldrum, you want to come?" "Yep, I'll be there." So yeah, it has, being in the Bigfoot community has its benefits. And I'm very proud to call those people my friends. Speaking of friends, the gentleman we have on the phone tonight, Stan, I've known Stan for about 45 years.
Wow.
Actually, about 45 years, right, Stan?
That's correct.
Yeah, we've been friends for a long, long time. And research partners. We do a lot of field research together. He's my mentor, a very dear friend of mine. So yeah, I've been very blessed over the years to get to know a lot of people. And that comes in handy when you're putting together events. I've been doing events since 1999. I did about 10 years worth of the East Coast Bigfoot Conference, and Stan was always one of the main headliners at that. In 2016, I started the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Camping Adventure for folks to learn about the subject, learn about Bigfoot, but also get their hands on, go out in the woods on a night hike, or take part in workshops. Hear from some of the leading researchers on the East Coast and across the country, and also the opportunity to meet some of the celebrity guests from the field, like Lyle Blackburn, I mentioned, Dr. Jeff Meldrum, Ron Moorhead, Jeff Headley, and Willie McQuillan from the show Mountain Monsters. So yeah, it's a great opportunity for people now that there's such a demand and interest in the subject. This gives people a chance to really get involved, not just to go to a conference and talk to people and meet people, but actually to go on a hike and learn the tools and the things needed to research and how to make a plaster casting. We've done that over the years, and what kind of tools to research with, and texts and tips and techniques of how to research. So yeah, it's a great event for the whole family, especially the kids that come out for it. And it's a charity fundraiser to boot. So we're raising money for some local area charities in the southwestern PA area.
Which is amazing. Stan, I have a question for you in a second here, because I'm fascinated by how it seems like the live ghost hunting investigation shows have gone the way of the dodo, and all of a sudden right now, anything having to do with UFOs and cryptids is red hot on television. And I'm going to ask you a question pertinent here in just a second, Stan. But one thing I wanted to ask you real quick here, Eric. Jay Bachochin has come out and said he's going to unveil something at your conference here in August. What is that?
It's his new movie called Finding Jay Part 3. And it's a look at the Kettle Moraine in southern Wisconsin, a very heavily forested area, not far from Bray Road. We're all familiar with the Beast of Bray Road.
Right.
The Kettle is not far at all from there, and he does his research in that area. He's put out 2 excellent documentaries about his research and about the Kettle and some of the interesting evidence he's found. Finding Jay Part 2, and then the new movie that's coming out, he'll be premiering it at our event, Finding J3, and he's put a lot of hard work into it. He does everything. He films, he edits, produces, directs. He does it all for the film. So we're excited to have Jay joining us once again, and he's going to be showing the film on Friday night for everybody that does not attend the night hikes. So it's a really exciting movie. I've seen the trailer for it, and it looks fantastic.
Wow. That's huge. I mean, that's absolutely huge to have that unveiled there that weekend.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Jay's been a good friend of mine for a long, long time, and he's been to all of our Bigfoot camping adventures. He's another one of the headliner speakers, and he does great work not only putting the movies out and a great new movie coming out, but he's an excellent researcher and just a heck of a nice guy. And I'm excited to have Jay back and to unveil and premiere this movie at the event.
Excellent. So, Stan, here's my question to you. You've been there and seen the initial impact from the Patterson-Gimlin film. We've gone all the way from that impact point to a point now in our society where we've swept the ghost shows aside, and we're in a period right now where UFOs and cryptids are hotter than ever and dominating paranormal television as we know it on network TV and on cable. I have to ask you, what is it about not only programmers' fascinations, but it seems like the world's fascination right now with this field, and why is it dominating the airwaves?
Well, there's no doubt it's a huge interest to the public. The last several years, more and more reports are coming in from Pennsylvania. I'm in touch with many researchers from around the country and out the country. And more people are beginning to willing to at least talk about some of these cases, but still so many witnesses that I interview when we remain anonymous because of their positions, because they're still afraid of that ridicule dealing with whether it's a UFO, Bigfoot, or cryptid. For so many of these people, it's a life-changing experience. This past weekend, I was invited to speak for 2 days at a big sportsman's outdoor show, and for 2 days, I had multitudes of witnesses coming up, and outdoorsmen and hunters who were sharing their encounters with me, many of them in recent years, many in recent months. None of them reported to anybody. And I know Eric gets reports, many other researchers. We have no idea how much of this activity is taking place. I get calls on these things, calls or reports coming in, email reports, constantly, week after week, all the time with reports. But people are much more open-minded today. They're much more willing to talk about it to a degree. You're hearing a lot more discussion, as you said, on radio and podcast and TV shows now. But as I learned many, many years ago, the Bigfoot field, the Bigfoot subject itself, it is much more complicated than most people realize. There's a lot more to it. It's much, much stranger. I learned that back in the 70s. Eric now knows that there's some very strange aspects of the Bigfoot mystery, and at least now it's starting to come out step by step. We're learning more about some of these very strange aspects of the Bigfoot phenomena, and I have no doubt in the months ahead you'll be hearing more.
When you say there's some very strange aspects to this, Stan, what is it that we're overlooking as a general public? Because I think, you've got apers, you've got the more mystical side of things. I think as a general public, we like to think, okay, we want to keep it simple. We like to think that maybe this is a species of some sort of ape that we've missed here in America, that maybe and I think we want to try to keep it based in reality. What is it as a as a population that we're missing the boat on the most?
Well, I've been out in the field investigating Bigfoot sightings since the 1960s. When I started investigating Bigfoot in Pennsylvania, at that time, I was convinced that Bigfoot was an unknown primate, some type of unknown creature which science had never confirmed existed. However, and just to give a little bit of background, because it plays a part of what we're talking about, in 1969, I set up a hotline for the public to report UFO sightings. But as word got out, people were calling in about everything from haunted houses to flying saucers to Bigfoot to cryptids, anything unusual. I became overwhelmed with the calls coming in. I couldn't do it on my own. So in 1970, I found the first of 3 volunteer research groups that for many years would investigate in Pennsylvania. Most of the people involved in my groups were specialists. We had scientists, engineers, technicians, former military specialists, police officers. We all did this voluntarily out of our own time and pockets. And it was lucky that we were set up because in 1973, here in Pennsylvania, first we had the largest UFO wave ever documented with hundreds and hundreds of UFO sightings all year long. And then we had the biggest Bigfoot outbreak in the summer of 73 that continued into early 1974. We've had Bigfoot sightings reported every year in Pennsylvania since then, including this year. But that's when we began to realize from the reports coming in from widespread areas that we're dealing with something that's very strange and unusual. And you've got to remember, again, 1973, there was no internet, no cell phones. So people had no way of knowing what people were reporting miles and miles away. And if you like, I know it takes a little bit of time because there's a lot of detail. Eric knows a lot about this as well. He's learned a lot about it. But we began to uncover some very strange things as my teams are on the scene, sometimes within minutes, hours after they occurred. By 73, as we were able to investigate cases across Pennsylvania, I had to set up where we could respond basically 24 hours a day when we were able to, and we did in some cases. And we were getting a lot of referrals at that point from the news media and from law enforcement across Pennsylvania. But at some point, if you want me to go into some of these details of some of the strange things,
please.
I'll be glad to do that for you.
Yeah, please. Let's. I mean, we've got some time before the break here. Let's get into it. Let's get into some of these details.
Okay, well, it's fascinating, I can tell you. And so we're getting reports in 73, in the 74, all year round, including wintertime. So our teams would get out there, and we get to some of these locations. We were able to interview the witnesses soon after it happened, so you got all the fresh details. You saw the emotion and reaction of the witnesses. Sometimes you saw very unusual animal reactions, because one thing we began to uncover at very early time was that even the most vicious dogs, when they're generally close to a lot of these Bigfoot-type creatures, they were like paralyzed in fear. They would shake, they would cower, they wouldn't bark. That was very common. That's been going on for years, including even recent months in Pennsylvania. But one of the first things that was very odd, we get out to some of these scenes in the snow. There were these very large footprints with big strides that would go a distance and then abruptly stop when there should have been more tracks. There was no way that could be fabricated. That's going on all over the country now. Mm-hmm. As the weeks went on, from miles and miles away, witnesses began to tell us about certain things they were experiencing. One was a pattern. We'd have a UFO sighting in a particular area. Within minutes to hours or days later, we'd have a Bigfoot sighting or vice versa. So when we talk about these instances, we're not talking about something that's extraterrestrial, because we don't know for sure what we're dealing with. But for a lack of a better term, and as I go into these cases, you understand one, we appear to be dealing with a phenomenon that has a physical and a non-physical component to it. For a lack of a better term, we'll call it interdimensional right now, because nobody understands what's going on. But these things, they come and go under certain conditions. They're here, they leave evidence at times, and they're gone. And just to give you a couple examples, going back to 1973. October 25th, 1973, I got a call from the State Police Barracks in Uniontown, Fayette County, Pennsylvania, which continues to be a very active hotbed for sightings, especially along the Chestnut Ridge. Eric's event's going to be up in Fayette County, where there's a lot of Bigfoot sightings for years. But October 25th, 73, a state trooper calls me, asked me to send up a team as soon as I could, that he believed that there was something still on the property where this incident had just happened that he investigated. There were 15 eyewitnesses who observed this barn-sized red sphere about 100 feet off the ground. this thing was kind of hovering there for a short time. The farmer's son, who would be the adult we're talking about, was coming out to visit his family. He sees people standing outside watching this thing low in the sky, and it looks like it's coming down on the pasture on his dad's property. He goes to a neighbor's house to get a better view. There were 2 young boys in that house. They decided they wanted to go up and see what this thing was. Before going up into the pasture, they stopped at his dad's farm. The older fellow grabbed a 30-06 and a handful of ammunition. Didn't realize that at the time he had 2 tracer bullets. So anyhow, I'll give you the short part of the story because we could talk for hours about one case.
Sure.
They make their way up to the pasture. When they get there, about 250 feet away, this huge, about 100-foot diameter UFO is now on the ground or right above it. It's no longer a complete sphere. It's like a half a sphere, like a big white dome illuminating the area, making this high-pitched whining noise. They're watching this thing in amazement, but soon after, their attention is drawn to a barbed wire fence about 75 feet away. Along that barbed wire fence are these 2 huge, hair-covered Bigfoot-type creatures walking slowly in their direction. The one in front is about 8 feet tall. The one right behind it's about 7 feet tall. These things are covered with very long hair hanging off the body. They have no neck. They're kind of moving in a stoop fashion, one behind the others, slowly moving along the fence line in their direction. Their arms are so long they hang below the knees almost to the ground, and they have large, luminous, glowing green eyes, and they're making these baby crying, whining noises. The one boy is so scared he ran out of the field. The other young fella yells to the older fella, shoot him, shoot him. The fella takes his first shot, he fires over their head. It turned out to be one of those tracer bullets. We just get that luminous trail. But here's where it gets intriguing. When he fires the second shot, which it's the other tracer bullet, fires over their head, the largest of the 2 creatures reaches out instead to grab that tracer and makes a loud whining, crying noise, and that huge luminous object in the field disappears. It doesn't take off and rise into the sky. It just physically vanishes and then it's gone. At that point, the creatures turn around and start walking back along the fence line. The fellow is now firing live ammo from his 30-06 into them with no effect whatsoever. They go back to their vehicle, go to the farmhouse, told the family what happened, took them to the neighbors and called the state police. Troop arrived 45 minutes later. The witness said, look, just forget about it. You could think I'm crazy. Trooper said, look, we had reported 2 of these creatures on the mountain the night before. I have to investigate it. Again, making the story short, the trooper told me they went up to the field where the object had been on the ground, and he said when he arrived on scene, that area, about 100 feet or more in diameter, was self-luminescent and glowing, where the object had been on the ground right above it. He told me, he said the farm animals wouldn't go anywhere near it, and he also told me, he said if he had a newspaper, he was certain he could bend down to the area and reach the newspaper from the glow coming off the area. They went back to the barracks, I was told, and again, there's a lot more to the story, and we don't have time for all of it. I was told both the trooper and the witness was taken to 2 separate rooms. They were separately interviewed. Then they called me to set up my team. And as the night went on and my team arrived early morning, we spent, I believe, the whole night there. Some of the very, very strange things developed. That's when we knew that we were dealing with something much stranger than just an unknown animal. But in the weeks ahead, the reports got stranger and stranger. And then there's this amazing case that I'll be glad to tell you about, which suggested to me and to others that once again we're dealing with something that has a physical and a non-physical component to it, and that's why there's no bodies. And if you want, I'll be glad to tell you that story.
Yes, but just real quick, Stan, you're telling me this creature caught a tracer bullet and no effect.
It reached out. It apparently never touched it, okay. But it reached out as though to grab at it.
Wow. And no fear whatsoever. It almost like it knows it's a projectile. It knows that it's some sort of weapon, but it really no regard for its own safety.
Well, when you fire those tracer bullets, you just get a luminous trail.
Right.
They use it for targeting. And but anyhow, that's what happened. We were there. We spent many days and over the weeks. We did a lot of investigation on the case. The state police were involved, and it's one of the strangest stories ever documented in the world. And that's when we began to realize we're dealing with something very strange. And then many other instances, miles and miles away, began to come in over the weeks and months ahead. We began to see patterns and similarities. Some of these cases are just amazing, just amazing cases we can share with you.
Let me ask one more question here, Stan, and then we'll move to the other particulars of this, and that's this. So, am I to understand this right? So I'm grasping this right. Are these two hairy creatures, were they not a part of this UFO? Were they moving towards this UFO, or were they a part of this UFO that was landing in this area?
All we know is this: when the witnesses got on the scene, the object's already on the ground, and the two creatures are standing there in the field at the same time.
Okay.
So we can't say it came from the object. Could they have already been there? We do not know.
Okay, so it's not like we don't know if they were summoned to the UFO from afar or if they were actually part of the UFO.
All we know is they were both there, involved in the same incident at the same time and place. And then were other cases similar as well that showed up later.
Interesting. Okay, I'm sorry. Continue. There's other information that goes along with this, yes?
Well, there's many other cases, but the case I'm going to tell you about now is even more fascinating in some degree.
Okay.
So it's February 6, 1974. This is way up in the mountains of Fayette County, and not far from where Eric will be holding his event coming up this year. It's not far at all from where this happened. It's way deep in the mountains when this occurred. The person involved lived in a cabin home deep in the mountains area. And it was a normal evening. This person, she's lived in the woods all her life. She knows the animals well. And she was sitting there watching TV. And she had a small little cabin, and she heard this commotion on her front porch. She had some empty soda cans out there, and something was moving the cans around. And it was 2 or 3 weeks before she had told me there was a pack of wild dogs came through. So she thought, I bet those dogs are back. So she thought, you know what? I'll grab my 16-gauge double-barrel shotgun. I'll load one chamber, and I'll just open the door, and I'll shoot over the head and scare the dogs away. So she proceeds to load her shotgun. She walks up to the front. She turns on the switch for the outside porch light. She opens up the door and walks out. But there's no dogs. 6 feet in front of her is this 7-foot-tall, gray-haired Bigfoot. Puts his arm straight up in the air when the light comes on. And how does she respond? She pulls the trigger and fires right into it. She said there's this bright flash of light, like a strobe on the camera, and that solid-looking Bigfoot vanished right in front of her. Her in-laws lived 100 feet away. They called and asked her what she was shooting at. She explained it to them. Her son-in-law grabbed his side and started walking down that dirt road. And reportedly, at some point, he was encountered by 4 or 5 hairy people with eyes like coals of fire, started shooting at him randomly. And about that same time, there was this large luminous object hovering over the trees at the same time. That's when they called the state police for help. And some of your listeners will remember the time period. It's February 1974. There was a big national trucker strike going on around the country. Okay. There was gas rationing. A lot of people remember the gas rationing. I couldn't get gas where I lived until early the next morning to get up to the scene. Mm-hmm. But because of the violence on the highways across the country, in Pennsylvania, you had the National Guard and the state police patrolling together. You had members of both units that responded to this incident. And I talked to the primary investigator, and he said by the time they found the location deep in the mountains, he said everything was over, but he said something very strange happened up there. He said, one, the witnesses were visibly and emotionally shaken. They were very detailed in what they described happened. But he said what convinced him were the animal reactions. They had a number of different animals on the farm, but they had several big dogs. I think one was an Eskimo Spitz German Shepherd. He said when they arrived on scene, dogs wouldn't move, they wouldn't bark. And he said that was so amazing to him how the animals responded. And that was the case, among others, that convinced me that something very strange is going on. It was the month before, it was a few months before, actually, up in that same area, where a fella had a lot of property that evening. It was almost dark. He was taking his hunting dogs out, and he noticed this figure way ahead of him, and he yelled out, what are you doing on my property? But as he got closer, he apparently realized that it was not a human, but it was some type of a hair-covered ape-like creature. And he fired at it with a sidearm. He thinks he hit it, apparently thought he hit it, but it physically disappeared. He could still hear it running, but he couldn't see it.
Wow.
That's just an example of some of the odd things that have been showing up. And now it's continued over the years. We're getting very unusual reports all over the country of similar things going on now. And that's just a small part of what we're finding out. We're finding cases of electromagnetic effects being involved with Bigfoot encounters. Maybe you've heard years and years ago, going back to the 50s and 60s, of UFOs hovering low over vehicles. And when that would take place, the car would begin to lose power. The headlights would dim. We have cases like that with Bigfoot, where Bigfoot runs out or rocks out in front of a car, and the car begins to lose power. The creature moves off, and the power comes back on. That's just a small sampling of the unusual things we're finding out about Bigfoot.
Yeah, incredible. Oh, wow, Stan. Wow. What stories? Okay, so let's take our break here. When we come back, you teased me off air that there was even a Men in Black tied to this story. So when we come back, we'll eventually get around to that. I want to hear that story as well. You've got some other stories as well having to do with Pennsylvania. And I have a key question for you as well, Stan, when we come back. Why is Pennsylvania a hub for this type of activity? I'm going to ask you that question when we come back here. Stan Gordon has a wonderful book out there. We have a link in the description of this program for you to go get it. It's called Creepy Cryptids and Strange UFO Encounters in Pennsylvania, Bigfoot, Thunderbirds, Mysteries of the Chestnut Ridge, and more, Casebook 4. So that's out, and we will link it up so you can go get a copy of that book as well. And by the way, tickets are available right now for Pennsylvania Bigfoot Camping Adventure, August 22nd and the 23rd out in Pennsylvania. And boy, I got to tell you folks, the list of presentations and presenters at this event, including Stan Gordon, are to be, you'll be awestruck. I'll just put it that way. I'm awestruck just taking a look at the presenters. They also include such presenters as Eric put it so eloquently, Jay Bachochin, you've got Lyle Blackburn, you've got Tim Cassidy's in here, you've got Steve Coles, you've got Steven Schneider, you've got so many. Dave Spinks is in here as well. Many more. Go to the website, which is hooked up as well in the description of this program, PABigfootCampingAdventure.com. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the PA Bigfoot Camping Adventure. And by the way, folks, proceeds go to charity for this event. So we want you to go and attend this event in August as well. But when we come back, more tales of Pennsylvania and the strange activity out there from Stan Gordon. We'll talk a little bit more about the PA Bigfoot Camping Adventure and much, much more with my guests, Eric Altman and Stan Gordon, right here on the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. My guests are Eric Altman and Stan Gordon. We're talking about the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Camping Adventure, a wonderful event that's taking place in Pennsylvania this August, the 22nd and the 23rd. Boy, what a lineup. Eric, briefly, give us just a blush of who's going to be at this event.
Well, we have 11, actually more than that. We've got about 15 guest speakers, and they include noted author, researcher, expert on the Boggy Creek creature from Fouke, Arkansas, Lyle Blackburn. We've got the leading scientific authority, college professor. Everybody knows him from all the TV shows. Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum will be there. From the Sierra Sounds from 1973, 74 up in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Ron Moorhead will be there as well, talking about that. From the TV show Mountain Monsters, Jeff Headley and Willie McQuillan will be making another appearance at the event. Some of the guest speakers include Stan, who we're talking with tonight and hearing some of these fascinating stories about Pennsylvania. And honestly, his research was a big factor in me getting involved in researching other cases in Pennsylvania. We got author Ron Murphy, author Steven Schneider, paranormal researcher, investigator, and TV celebrity from West Virginia, Dave Spinks. The Squatch detective, author Steve Calls is coming in. Jay Pachochin, producer, director, creator of the 3 Finding Jay movies, which he'll be premiering at the event, Finding Jay 3. Researcher from New Jersey, Mike Famelant. Researcher Matt Arner from northeastern Pennsylvania, as well as Sean Forker, and he's the host of Sasquatch Experience podcast. We've got the Cryptozoologist, I believe he's called.
Okay.
His name is Kenny Irish, a good friend of mine coming in. We have a wildlife naturalist, former park ranger, former forestry officer, Tim Cassidy, who's going to be joining us. And Tim had a sighting in the state of Indiana about 20 years ago, and he'll be talking about that. Plus some of the research that he's done. I mean, he's been in the national park system, worked at Yellowstone and some of these big parks, and he'll tell us about what's involved with the research there. Plus we have workshops. We have a law enforcement officer coming down from New York, Mike Ann, who's going to be showing people what to use as far as equipment goes and how to use some of the high-tech stuff that's out there now to help search for Bigfoot. We've got night hikes. We've got vendors, food trucks, Chinese auction to help benefit the charities we're raising money for as well. And it's taking place, our big sponsor, and they've gotten behind us with a full 100%. Bender's Meadow Run Campground. This is our 5th year there. And they like the idea so much they became our main sponsor of the event.
Nice.
So it's going to be a great event for the family. And I know kids are a big fan of Bigfoot now, so bring them along.
Mm-hmm.
Tickets are really cheap. It's $25 for Friday, $30 for Saturday. And if you want to come for both days, it's $50. Children under 12 are free with a paid adult admission. So,
which is nothing for the caliber of guests you have coming. I got to admit. That's nothing. Absolutely nothing.
And I also got to throw this in there too real quick. If you ever wanted to go looking for Bigfoot and you were just afraid to do it, we offer night hikes on Friday night and Saturday night with hiking guides that will take you into an area where there's been countless Bigfoot sightings over the decades. And I've even had some really crazy experiences there myself. So you get to go in a very hot, active area of Bigfoot activity, and maybe you'll have an encounter or a sighting.
Let me ask you this, and I'll start with you, Eric, and then I'll pass it off to Stan here, and we'll continue getting some different encounters here with Stan. When you say we're gonna take you into this area, I know fear is the number one thing here, right? And for someone, especially who's never had a Bigfoot encounter, but they've maybe heard some negative Bigfoot encounters, what's the number one thing you can say to someone when you're taking them into an area like that to assure them that, hey, you really don't have as much to fear as you think you might have, or might be having that trepidation? What do you say to them to assure them that you shouldn't be so trepidatious? Well,
the first thing I tell them is there's safety in numbers, and they're not going out there by themselves. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a group of that they're with, and the majority, if not, I'd say 95% of Bigfoot encounters or sightings are docile sightings. In other words, the Bigfoot is seen and takes off in the other direction. There's very rarely an aggressive behavior displayed by a Bigfoot. There are a few cases in history where Bigfoot reportedly attacked someone or attacked a cabin, the 8 Canyon incident in 1924, or kidnapped someone, the Albert Ostman incident in 1924. But those are very rare cases. And Stan could even allude to this. I mean, there's cases where Bigfoot has chased people and thrown rocks and sticks at people, but that's more of I think, in my opinion, a territorial behavior where it's trying to get that person out of the area. It doesn't want them there. But I don't know of, and maybe Stan could add to this, I don't know of any cases where a Bigfoot has physically harmed someone. Usually it's just to scare them out of the area, or the Bigfoot takes off in one direction and the person takes off in another. So I tell people, you're in a group, so there's safety in numbers. You're out with experienced researchers who know the area and have been here many, many times. And honestly, if a Bigfoot comes around, if it truly does come around, it's probably more scared of you than you are of it. And it's not going to stick around very long. So there's really nothing to worry about. I would be more concerned about them spraining an ankle on the trail, or maybe walking into a tree, something like that. If they're not paying attention, low hanging branch.
Yeah.
But we do have liability waivers and insurance for that, just to let everybody know.
Right.
But yeah, I think, a person's chance of injuring themselves out in the woods by being careless and not paying attention is more likely to happen than having a negative encounter with a Bigfoot.
Stan, are you aware in your storied career of attacks within Pennsylvania of, let's just say, aggressive Bigfoot?
Well, I've got to agree along with what Eric is saying. I've interviewed hundreds of people who have seen Bigfoot, including quite a number of them already this year. And once again, while we have many Bigfoot sightings, by the way, in daylight. And in the last few years, these cases are increasing dramatically, where people are seeing these things at very close range. We're talking 50, 60 feet away from people in some cases. So we're getting very detailed reports coming in. But of the hundreds of people I've interviewed, yes, these things seem interested in human activity, but generally when they're seen, they run off. And I again, even with cases in Pennsylvania, I cannot think of any that I can confirm where these things came out and physically tried to hurt somebody or did physically hurt somebody. Yes, on occasion they'll throw small boulders or tree branches towards people, but I agree with Eric what he said about being something basically just trying to scare people away from their areas or what they consider their areas. But that's the way it is, and but again, we're dealing with something unknown, so you got to be very, very careful because we don't really know what we're dealing with.
Let me ask another question, because this is, and I'm just talking from my own perspective, okay? And I'll deal with a particular that may happen on your trip. As far as I go, I'm a very friendly type person, and here at my house, I have different animals that I interact with. So I have birds, I have chipmunks, I have semi-trained chipmunks here at my house. I have 5 of them that absolutely love me. I love them, right? And so I feed them. I have black oil sunflower seeds. I have peanuts feed that I feed them. And so I have blue jays that come swooping out of trees and they come feed on peanuts and seeds. And I have bunnies that come out and feed on this stuff. And they're not shy with me. But I give them their space, right? I don't treat them like pets. They're not pets. They're wild animals. There's a respect there between the two. With that, I'll ask you this. What's that boundary or that border with Bigfoot? Should you be feeding Bigfoot? And what would you say to people who are coming to this trip? And I'll start with Eric and I'll go to Stan. And how do you deal with this in a regular everyday scenario at your house?
I would not advise people to put food out for Bigfoot, because if you habituate them, they're going to continue to come around. And I've talked to people who've had those situations where the Bigfoot comes around quite often. And the people are usually leaving out food or garbage for the Bigfoot to come to. What happens on that day when you don't leave out food and the Bigfoot's hungry? I mean, they are an animal as far as we know, and they do have some strange abilities, as Stan mentioned, and strange attributes. But if it truly is an animal or a physical being of some sort, if you're feeding it and you take away its food, it may not be happy. So you may have to deal with some interesting consequences, so to speak. I can't say the Bigfoot's going to attack people, but I wouldn't advise feeding a Bigfoot, just like I wouldn't advise people feeding the lions at the zoo. Leave that for the professionals. Don't feed a Bigfoot. Right. That's just my opinion.
Stan, even if it's on a small trip like this, it's a couple of days, still don't throw something to a Bigfoot just to entice it?
Well, I can tell you, we knew back in the early 70s these creatures loved apples, corn, and berries. We had people who were watching these things popping whole apples in their mouth, and that was pretty fascinating. But I have to agree with Eric. There's so much we just don't know or understand, and you got to be very cautious. And once again, I think what Eric said is probably accurate. I wouldn't be putting any food out there trying to attract them to keep coming back to your property. If they wanted to do it, they'll do it on their own. We know they like corn. We've had cases over the years, and even in recent years, these things chasing deer and carrying deer over their shoulders. We had a really good incident up in the border of Indiana, Westmoreland County, up by the Chestnut Ridge, not too far from there. When this happened, this was early morning. It was just dawn, as the sun was coming up and this person's deep in her property, she sees this 9-foot-tall gray-haired Bigfoot carrying a deer over his right shoulder, came up out of the woods. They're about 60 feet apart. She didn't have her camera phone with her. They stared at each other. They had eye contact. It made a loud grunt and ran off through the field into the woods with the deer.
Oh, wow. That's power. I mean, that's just sheer power. I don't know what I'd do if I saw something that big carrying a deer on its shoulder, just, running by me. I don't know whether to, pardon the language, S or go blind at that point, right? And how do you react to something like that?
This is, again, it's so interesting to talk to hunters, and I can tell you, right before the pandemic, I was at an outdoor show speaking, and I had a lot of hunters also coming up to me back then around the Pittsburgh area. And I remember at least two of them, I think it was three of them at one point, independently. And I remember two of these fellows on different cases that came up and shared their experience. They told me they had been out in the woods all their life, 20, 25 years hunting. They had never seen a thing until that one occurrence, which had happened recently at the time. And I remember one of them, at least one of them was in tears, describing it to me, saying that he loves the woods, but he doesn't know if he'll ever go out again after seeing what he saw. For so many of these people, it is such a life-changing experience because they realize they saw something that's not supposed to exist. And so many of these people were afraid to even share it with their closest friends and even relatives, sometimes even their spouses. And it changes people forever. I mean, I'm in touch with some of these witnesses still from 30, 40 years ago, and it's just amazing to see how their lives are changed and how even today they're affected by what they saw. And every case is different. Every personality is different. A lot of people don't want to get involved in it. Other people are out there looking for evidence to prove their stories. Some people were just, their lives were completely taken over by these type of reports. So it's really amazing what you deal with over the years.
Let me ask you this, Dan. Do you ever come across the type of personality, a hunter in the woods that comes across Bigfoot who decides, you know what, that's my next target, that's my next big game? Now that I've had that experience where I've run across it, maybe I switch my sight from deer to Bigfoot?
I have always told people, or as long as I've been doing this, I recommend not to shoot at these things. And from what we now know, it's not going to matter anyhow, because apparently it's not a good thing to shoot at these creatures, and the shooting at them does not affect these creatures, as bizarre as it sounds. We've had people shoot at them with all types of weapons, from small-sized sidearms to some very powerful weapons like the case of 30-06, and nobody's ever brought one down. But in the years that my teams were out there, we never took guns with us. And that's just how it was. And again, there's so much more that I know we won't even have time to talk about tonight. There's so much more of these type of things. And then we've heard, over the years, I've heard these amazing accounts years and years and years ago, maybe 20, 30 years ago or more, from credible people. And some not just from PA, but from out of state, who swear to me and others that what they experienced was very, very strange, but there were strange elements to it. And I remember one person telling me years and years ago of a case involving a person who was confronting a Bigfoot. He had a weapon, and he mentally heard telepathically or in his head, it told him, do not reload, do not shoot. And he did not. And those are the kind of things you run across. And it is very, very bizarre what we're dealing with. Wow.
Do not reload and do not shoot. That's pretty powerful. Although, and the reason I asked that question, I'll tell you this much, Stan, is this. You have certain personality types. Like you said, there's a hunter that breaks down weeping saying, I don't want to go back in the woods again. I don't know what it is I've seen. You have others that almost, when they get out in the woods, it's almost an alpha experience. I want to be the biggest thing out here, and I have to conquer nature. And those type of hunters are a little scary. I'm not gonna lie. And almost feel like they need to conquer whatever it is that's out there. And I don't want to call it an inferiority type deal, but it's almost like they need to be the king of the mountain, right? and conquer nature. And I'm just wondering if you've ever come across a personality like that that's looked you in the eye and said, well, Stan, I have a new target now. I've got to conquer it.
No, that's really not that common whatsoever.
Okay.
I mean, I think more and more people, they just want answers to what they experienced and what they saw. I mean, a lot of people call me about their sightings, and they just want to know, did anybody else see this? Did they report anything similar? Did anybody see something in my same area? And that's very common. Quite often we have answers for them because, yes, we probably had other reports from their areas, and sometimes on the same day, because I keep records of all the cases, that sometimes people reporting in their area or not far from there the same day about other unusual activity taking place. So it's quite interesting, the patterns we see.
Because I find the whole hunting Bigfoot thing a stance that comes from ignorance. That's generally someone who's not been out in the woods very often. It's someone who has no idea what they're dealing with, and it's a fantasy, right? Is that your experience, Stan, from all the years that you've been out there?
You know what? You kind of fade out. Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
Sure, not a problem. I kind of find the whole hunting Bigfoot thing, and you know, whenever you see a story about legislation going through trying to protect Bigfoot from people who want to hunt Bigfoot, I find the whole people who say that they want to hunt Bigfoot is kind of a stance that comes from ignorance. It's people who have no idea what they're dealing with. They're not really educated as far as the woods hunting in general. And they're going in blind, and it's kind of a fantasy thing, isn't that what you find as well in all your experience?
Well, yeah, you do run across some people like that. Most people, I don't think, are really out to try to shoot or kill one of these things. But again, each personality is different. Sometimes a person wants to find physical proof once and for all to prove that they saw what they saw. But I don't think that's the right way to do it, and you've got to be very careful because of the laws across different parts of the United States, and my understanding, even here in Pennsylvania, even though Bigfoot is now recognized as something that's actually scientifically provable, that my understanding of some of the game laws is that, in fact, if you kill one of these creatures and they find it has human traits, then you could be in some very big problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Switching gears a little bit here. I had a long talk, and at one point on this show, I had Ronnie LeBlanc on, and he's got a series of Monsterland books out there. And one of the things that he has pointed out in the Monsterland books is, in his growing up in Massachusetts, he had never seen a Bigfoot without seeing a UFO. Had never seen a UFO without seeing a Bigfoot. He seemed to see that they were both tied in, much like you had pointed out here earlier, Stan. And with that, before the show, we were talking a little bit about Men in Black. And you said that there was an interesting set of stories that you could possibly regale us with. How do Men in Black tie into this whole story?
Well, I'll give you a couple examples. So I mentioned to you briefly about that case where there were multiple witnesses see this UFO coming down, lands on the field, two Bigfoot there at the same time. So that was a very involved, very detailed case. And over the years, I would like to follow up with some witnesses, some really important cases. So it was back in the 80s when I was just doing the follow-up with one of the main witnesses involved in this case. We never hypnotized him. We had people in my team who were professionals, could have done it, but we rarely ever used hypnosis. And we had never considered doing it because some of the things that had occurred during the case, that a famous psychiatrist, Berthold Schwartz, came up, spent a week up here investigating the case back in 73 when this happened, and he recommended not using hypnosis at that time. But now, many years later, we're considering the possibility. So my team goes up to interview this witness. This is in the mid-'80s, I would believe. And we approach him, and we said, we're considering now the possibility, would you be interested in being hypnotized? And he looked at us very strange. He said, why do you want to hypnotize me again? We said, what are you talking about? He said, well, back in 73, when this was occurring and you had your investigators here often and we were doing a lot of, talking about the case, two men showed up, which he said, I always thought they were connected with your group. One was in a dark suit. The other was in an Air Force uniform. The man in the Air Force uniform had a briefcase. And he said the men wanted me to tell them the whole story of what happened, what I saw, what I experienced. And then the Air Force officer opens his briefcase and pulls out all these photographs of Bigfoot and UFOs. I remember him telling me specifically there was one picture of a Bigfoot carrying a dead pig under its arms, climbing a fence, I believe it was in Georgia. And they wanted him to pick out the picture of the UFO and the Bigfoot that looked similar to what he saw. And then apparently they did hypnotize him. They thanked him for his time. They said they would be in touch. And they believed the story, and he never heard from them again. And, of course, we tried to find out who these people were. So you got to remember, the Air Force was involved in Project Blue Book with UFO research. That project ended in January of 1970. This is 1973. And we could find no indication of anybody connected with Blue Book or any Air Force agency involved in this, and we never forgot who they were. That was very interesting. I had other cases I was involved with over the years where I had incidents involving UFOs or cryptids, where there was some type of physical evidence, and these mystery men, whoever they were, showed up and were apparently looking for other physical evidence at the scene. But I can tell you this, which you'll find fascinating. You know, the public is aware that the government's been interested in UFO cases for years. Mm-hmm. But I can also tell you, from my experience, the government's been interested in Bigfoot cases as well. So here's this massive wave going on here in 73. September of 73, when all this activity is going on, the phones in my home here are ringing day and night. In fact, in two cases, the phones were overloaded with so many calls coming in. The phone company had never seen anything like it before. The phone lines couldn't handle all the calls I was receiving. In September of 73, a man called me and said he worked for the government. There were a very interesting investigation I was doing on the Bigfoot sightings. At that time, I was given a government laboratory in Washington, D.C. They have a contact, an address, and a phone number. In the event we came up with a body or something significant, I never had to call that number. Interestingly, I believe it was about 2 weeks later, I get a call from one of the congressman's office in the area requesting a meeting with me. Two members from that office came to my home. These men were very professional. They seemed very interested. I gave them that phone number, and they called back to me and said, this is indeed an official government phone number in Washington, D.C. And I kept in touch with those fellows for many years. They were very supportive. And so that's just an idea, or just one of the things that I came across during the 73 outbreak. Very interesting.
You know, I've heard stories from other people who've been on this show, Stan, that particularly off Indian reservations or Native American reservations. I shouldn't call it an Indian reservation. My apology. That if they see a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot on a reservation, or if they happen to come across a body, you will immediately either see reservation officials or U.S. government officials come and recover that body. That it isn't necessarily one of the creatures that will recover the body, and that they'll abscond with that body and it'll be gone. Have you heard of anything such as this?
I can tell you it's extremely rare in Pennsylvania to hear those accounts. Have I heard such cases? Allegedly, yes. Going back probably 20, 30 years ago, I've heard stories, secondhand reports of helicopters coming in with special type of officers, heavily armed, supposedly with tranquilizer guns, out looking for a Bigfoot, have been seen in the area. Can I confirm any of it? I cannot. I've just heard those type of stories. I've heard many of these stories over the years from around the country as well. But, I want to bring up something that Eric's familiar with now, too, and I think it's one of the most important part of both the UFO mystery and also the Bigfoot mystery that not too many people are talking about, but you're beginning to hear more about it now, and a lot of the TV shows, a lot of the talk shows are talking about it now. I've been doing this since the 1960s. I've called these mini UFOs for years. But these cases are increasing dramatically, not only in Pennsylvania, but around the country. And there's a Bigfoot connection to it. That these reports of these small orbs, of course, an orb is something spherical in nature. So these balls of light, low level on the ground, in Pennsylvania for years, and all over the country now in locations where we have a history of Bigfoot activity. Many investigators and witnesses are now observing these small spheres of light quite often low to the ground, and in some instances coming within a few feet of some of the observers. And I knew about this years and years ago. So there's a connection between these small spheres of light and the Bigfoot phenomenon as well. In 1973, September 73, north of Pittsburgh, two witnesses were waiting for a friend to pick them up. These two women see this around 7-8 foot tall, white-haired Bigfoot running across the road towards the woods, but in one of his hands is carrying a small glowing ball of light. And a short time later, this object came across the sky, projected beam of light down into the woods where the creature ran into. We had no idea in 73 what we were dealing with, and now we're hearing reports all over the country of these orbs of light, and I can go into great detail about some of the cases I've had with these objects that are just amazing that a lot of people are not aware of.
Now, with these orbs, are they a specific color? Because I've heard orange orbs. I've heard kind of a yellowish orb. I've also heard a white orb. Are they a specific color orb? Or even a red, too?
There's various types. Orange, red, blue is very common. And interestingly, from what we're hearing around the country, in case in Pennsylvania, we've had some instances where these things have been within a few feet of people. We're hearing more reports now of these things appearing inside of people's homes. And in some cases, there's some similar physiological effects being reported as well. And it's very rare to get those kind of reports. But we've had some people who have reported these things, and I think Eric, if he's interested, he may want to tell you about some of his personal experiences and some things he knows about now. I'll turn it over to Eric and see what he wants to say.
Sure. Eric, what do you know of these orbs?
Too much.
Too much? What happened?
Too much. I've seen them. I've experienced them. My research partner, Tom, had a close encounter with two of these orbs. One was the size of a basketball. One was the size of maybe a grapefruit, a little bit bigger. They came within 5 feet of him and disappeared. And he suffered some pretty significant eye bleeds where the vessels in his eye would rupture and his eye would fill with blood. And it happened shortly after he had this close encounter with these two balls of light. He had to have injections in his eye. He had to have a laser thing to kind of cauterize these vessels because they continually bleeded. Yeah. He never had any problems like that at all before the incident. And I can't say for sure if it's related or not, but it seems kind of suspicious that he has this experience with these two balls of light within 5 feet of him. And just as he's about to speak, and he thinks it's somebody with a flashlight, just as he's about to talk, the lights vanish, they're gone. And weeks later, he starts having these health issues with his eye. I have personally seen these orbs of light, and I've been very close to them. I'll share one experience with you that kind of freaked me out a little bit, to be honest with you. We go to an area in Fayette County. It's not on the Chestnut Ridge, but close to the Chestnut Ridge. And the Chestnut Ridge is very well known for all its unusual activity, UFO, cryptids, haunted locations, etc. And we're in an area investigating. We call the area X. We don't want to give away the location because we don't want everybody coming in there, tromping around and ruining it. Mm-hmm. But long story short, we were there one night. My son was with me, and my research partner, Tom, was with me. And we're standing on a dirt road, and we're miles and miles from any homes around the area. So there's nobody up there. We arrived at dusk. We decided to stay well past dark. And it was probably about 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. I walked up this dirt road where Tom had his encounter with the balls of light on. And I'm standing on this road probably about maybe 150, 200 yards from the other researchers who are in a big clearing. And as I'm standing there, Tom comes up to the road, meets me, and we're standing there talking. And in the distance, I see somebody walking towards us. And it turns out it's my son. And he's carrying my thermal FLIR, and he's looking in the woods on the left side of the road and on the right side of the road. He's about 50 to 100 feet away from us. I mean, he's close where you can see the light illuminating him, and you can see him spinning the thermal FLIR left and right, looking on both sides of the road. All of a sudden comes up on his right a white light, like somebody's walking towards us with a flashlight. And I yelled out to Josh, I said, "Is that you? Do you have a flashlight?" He said, "No, Dad, I just have the thermal FLIR." I said, "Well, where's the white light coming from? Is someone coming up behind you?" And he turned, looked, no. And all of a sudden, right behind him appears this red ball of light. It's a very bright LED colored light. And there's one in front of him, one behind him. He's looking around. He can't see it. And Tom and I are looking right at him and seeing these two balls of light. One looks like a flashlight beam pointing right at us. The other one's a very bright red LED light. The white light goes out. The red light looks like somebody puts down on the ground, and it goes out. We start walking towards him very quickly. There's nobody there. Whoa. My son is standing there with a thermal FLIR. He does not have a flashlight. He has no red lights, anything like that. He's standing on this road by himself, and we walk over to him. We ask him, "Is anybody around you?" "No, there's nobody around me. I was looking for animals in the woods with the FLIR." And to this day, I still can't explain where the lights came from. We radioed down to the research group. Like I said, they were about 150, 200 yards away. "Were you guys shining flashlights up this way?" They answered no. We weren't shining any kind of lights towards you. And this is the same road where about maybe 6 months earlier that Tom had his face-to-face encounter with this white and almost a amberish reddish colored light that came within 5 feet of him and disappeared. And we're not the only people that have witnessed this. There have been other witnesses who have seen these balls of light on the road. There is a YouTube series out there that people can watch. It's called Sasquatch Unearthed: The Ridge. And it's episode 2 of the series. And a film crew, Small Town Monsters, I'm sure you know Seth Breedlove.
Yep.
Yeah, he accompanied us out to this Area X, and he filmed lights on this road. And his film crew had experiences with lights on the road. The researchers that were with us, there was probably 6 to 8 people spread out throughout the area. They all saw the lights. So what these lights are, I don't know. Stan calls them mini UFOs. I don't know what to call them, but they are showing up in areas where there have been Bigfoot sightings and Bigfoot encounters. Now, this area that we were experiencing and investigating, there have been several Bigfoot sightings within a 5-mile distance of where these lights are occurring. And we stumbled across this area by accident, just driving the back mountain roads, trying to, look and see if there's anything around or we can find any evidence. We stumbled across this area, and we've been researching this area for several years now and have had numerous unusual experiences there. But the balls of light, I don't care what anybody says, they're real. I've seen them myself on several different occasions. My best friend, Tom, my research partner, had them right in his face. And he's not one to fabricate and make up stories. And now he has eye bleeds from them. So something weird's going on with these balls of light. I don't know what they are. I don't know where they come from. I just have no answer for it.
Oh, gosh.
And I'll comment on that because I know Eric, I've told him about these stories years and years ago, and I think Eric will even say that he was skeptical about it until he had his own encounter.
Stan, let me ask you real quick. Why term them mini UFOs? What is it about the makeup of them that makes you think that they... Because to say UFO, it kind of intimates that these things may have some sort of a physical structure or that there's something more to it that connects it to a physical world. What is it about it that makes you think it may be involved with the UFO?
Well, that's what I first learned about. I knew about this going back to the 60s. And what I found out as the years went on, the small sizes were about the size of oversized fireflies or lightning bugs. A lot of them are about the size of a golf ball to a baseball, to about 1 or 2 feet in diameter, and they're generally spherical, but not always. And while they're generally light sources of various colors, some appear to be more solid than others. In many, many reports, these things are very bright, but yet they emit no surrounding light when they're moving or don't light up surrounding areas when they're moving. But for years, I've had reports of these things in daylight following and pacing vehicles on highways. I've had them enter people's homes and cars through open windows. I've had them tap on people's living room windows, and when they're seen, they fly off. In more recent years, these things now appear inside of people's homes. So let me give you an example. 2022, we had the biggest surge of these cases here in Pennsylvania we've ever had. and from all over the state. And amazing reports coming in. So in October of 2022, up in Fayette County again, one of my research associates, Jim Brown, who's a real high-tech investigator, he investigated this case. This man, early morning, I think around 6 o'clock in the morning, his wife finds him sound asleep on the porch in that very cold weather in his pajamas and slippers. She had a heck of a time waking him up, and finally when he was awakened, he said he had walked out towards the newspaper box to get the newspaper, had just been delivered, but as he's walking towards the box, this small sphere was just a few feet away from him, and he said he got so tired all of a sudden he couldn't stay awake and he fell asleep. So 3 days later, outside of Ligonier, PA. So you've got the edge of the Chestnut Ridge, and then you have the Laurel Ridge, which is also quite active with areas around there with Bigfoot and the orbs and UFOs and whatever, balls of light cryptids. It's around 2:30 in the morning, as I recall. This woman's awakened to go to the restroom. She comes out of the bathroom. About 5 feet away in her living room is this blue sphere, about a foot or two in diameter, just hovering there. And she said she could feel like a dark mass floating around the side of this thing. She remembered taking one step towards it. She felt like a slight electrical jolt. And she said all of a sudden she got so tired she couldn't stay awake. So the next day she felt very weak and very sickly. But she told me, she said, I'm an insomniac. I don't fall asleep. For her to go to sleep like that was so unusual. And now we're hearing similar type of physiological effects being reported. So that's quite interesting.
I have kind of a weird hunch, suggestion, if I can throw my 2 cents in, and call it what you will, Stan, and you tell me if I'm nuts or not. So when I hear about these, because this isn't the first time I've ever heard of them, and I've heard many reports of them, but each time that I hear a report of it, or each time I hear a story about it and what type of effect it has on someone, I get the impression that what people are seeing is maybe even, because you know how, I'm not using my words right here, Stan, give me a moment. You know how people, when they see the physical form, and I'm using that in air quotes, I know you can't see me right now, Stan, but the air quote of, they see the physical form of a Sasquatch or Bigfoot, and they tend to get scared by it or intimidated by it. What if Sasquatch isn't so much a physical creature, but an ethereal creature, and a interdimensional creature, and it appears to you in a soul form, that sphere may be its soul form, or an ethereal form, or a interdimensional form, and it appears to you as that sphere. And that little bit of sapping energy or whatever it is, it's trying to communicate to you on a different level, on a different plane or a soul plane. And we aren't capable of communicating on that level. And that,
go ahead.
Or say a psychic level, or some sort of level where we just can't connect in that way. And it just saps our energy and we're done.
Well, you've hit on what we've been finding now for more and more in recent years. Again, not just in PA, but around the country. I've interviewed many witnesses and many researchers around the country. They're telling me similar accounts that they're receiving. It gets stranger and stranger. Okay, because one, I can tell you this in Pennsylvania. You know, it's not just, let me go a little further. You can be in the right place at the right time to have a Bigfoot encounter, for example, or a cryptid encounter. More and more reports are coming in, not just from wooded or forested areas. We're getting more reports from around major cities, more populated areas where there's not a lot of woods around, for example. We get a lot of reports of these things appearing to be physically solid, but we have other cases where these things look more misty or foggy looking. We've had reports where a part of the body is solid and other parts are, you can see through them, or transparent, or it's just very, very strange. We've had reports of these things not only with huge strides running fast, reports of these things apparently floating or gliding above the ground. But also, as bizarre as it sounds, there are reports of these balls of light, these spheres of light, physically changing into a Bigfoot or other creature, or creatures changing other creatures. It is so unbelievable, but you've got so many people describing similar things that you just can't eliminate it. You've got similar patterns. You have people from hundreds, probably 1,000 miles away. We're hearing similar reports from other states. People are so reluctant to talk about these type of things. There was one case that Eric and I investigated several years ago down in the Mon Valley. So these are these communities down around the Monongahela River, about 30-some miles outside of Pittsburgh. There have been sightings for years all along, from giant thunderbirds to black panthers to Bigfoot sightings to UFOs to weird things in the river, the UFOs above the river, and weird things in the rivers as well. And but several years ago, this fellow, was a pouring down rainy night. This fellow was on a 2-lane farm road, and it was very hard to see at that point. He had his headlights on, of course, and he notices something on the left side of the road. Suddenly, this thing steps out in front of his car, literally 5 feet in front of his vehicle. It's a 7-foot-tall, hair-covered Bigfoot with glowing eyes, just standing there 5 feet away, staring at him. He looks at it. It looks at him. He was so close that he could not see the legs because the hood of the vehicle was blocking it. But it turns, and suddenly it takes big strides to the right of the vehicle, goes up this little hill. And this guy is right behind it. He grabs his cell phone to take a picture, and he's watching this thing in his headlights, goes to take a picture, and it's gone.
Wow.
And he had no explanation. Like he said, my eyes were adjusted. Even if it was out of the range of my headlights, I still should have seen it run off.
Yeah.
He could not explain it. So Eric and I were out to the next day at the scene with him. I talked to this guy within half an hour after it happened. And he was very, very shaken on the phone. You could emotionally very shaken by what he experienced. The next day, you could tell the guy was he was a very good guy, educated person. He was still being affected by what he told about what happened. It poured all night, so there was no tracks out there. But I believe him because I've heard similar accounts where people were seeing these things right in front of them, and then it's just gone. People told me in the last few years that they would see a Bigfoot suddenly appear right in front of them in the middle of the highway. So it didn't enter the road and move across. It just suddenly appeared out of nowhere. They see it from head to toe, and then it's gone. Wow. And those are the kind of things that are going on. Eric, I'm sure you remember that report.
Oh, yeah. The kid, when we interviewed him, he was a young man. And when we interviewed him, he was crying, retelling us his story. You could see tears welling up in his eyes. And where he showed us where he came to a stop and where the creature was standing in the road, on the opposite side of the road, as Stan mentioned, it's a little hill, but it's a cemetery, an old cemetery. And there are no trees to obstruct the view. There should be nothing at all to prevent him from seeing what's right in front of him in the high beams. And it walked across the road, as Stan said, to the right and went up this little gravel hill into the cemetery. He realizes he has a cell phone sitting on the seat next to him. He turns his car and follows this thing up the road, pulls his phone up to take a picture, and it's gone. Jeez. And if I remember correctly, Stan, he said it didn't run off. He didn't see it run off. It was just gone.
Yeah. And that's what I've been hearing for years. And I'm hearing these reports from all over the country, from many other researchers. And like I said, I keep repeating myself, what we're dealing with is so beyond our present scientific understanding, nobody understands it.
So as we start to kind of wrap up a little bit here, Stan, let me ask you this. Is it one of those things where Bigfoot has just decided, you know what, I don't need to make a huge production of disappearing. I don't need to make it look like I'm running off and disappearing. I can just disappear in front of you now? Or has it always just disappeared like this?
Well, I can tell you, during that outbreak in 1973, and we're interviewing different witnesses, and there was a number of incidents back then in Greensburg, where I live, actually several miles away. It was all wood at the time. It was behind what was in the Green Gate Mall. And we had some amazing incidents, but there were witnesses down there independently who said in daylight they would see this 7-8 foot tall hair covered creature, maybe 20, 30 feet away, that would suddenly vanish and moments later reappear another short distance away. Over weeks later, from far separated areas up around Jamonville. So now we're talking very close to where Eric is going to have his Bigfoot adventure. there were witnesses up there in Jamontville, which is the big historical site from the French and Indian War. And they have these big stone monuments up there. And there were people back then saying they'd see this huge hairy creature standing there. It would physically vanish and reappear near another monument. Same kind of reports coming in. That's what's been going on for years and years, but a lot of people didn't know about it, didn't want to talk about it, and now we're hearing more and more cases like this. And again, there's so many elements we haven't even talked about today. One of these things that's very fascinating is that there are reports around the country, and they're very, very rare in Pennsylvania, but I've had a few cases, and I believe these people are telling the truth, where people swear that these creatures have tried to mentally or telepathically communicate with them. And I have one very interesting case. I'm glad to tell you the story.
Please.
Okay. So this is mid-1980s. This was along the Westmoreland County side of the Chestnut Ridge, not far from Derry, PA, which has a long history of Bigfoot sightings year after year, including this year. And some of the local landowners called me to come out, and my team went out because they were reporting seeing this huge, hairy Bigfoot creature that had been coming down from the top of the ridge, down lower around the property and scaring their animals. So when my team gets there, there's a group of people, locals, want to share their stories. And one of the persons in the group said to me, I don't have to tell you this, she said, I can't explain it, but she said, at times, it seems as though this creature is trying to mentally communicate with me. So we're interviewing the people, and this person then says, all of a sudden, this creature is telling me right now that tomorrow morning, about 15 miles away in Indiana County, over Homer City, Pennsylvania, there'll be a very strange UFO incident. At the early morning hours the next day, over Homer City, Pennsylvania, there were multiple reports of this very strange, bizarre sound, as though something was hovering over the town, but they couldn't see it. It was so strange they called the fire department out.
Wow. And I mean, there's just no way to explain that, is there? I mean, no explanation. No, I mean, just no way to. From a skeptic side, no way to prove it, but no way to explain it either, right?
That's it. I mean, when you're dealing with these kind of cases all the time, similar but differences from so many people, so many credible people, you would be amazed at the backgrounds. I mean, I get calls again from men, women, and children, educators, scientists, engineers, first responders, all kind of people who are so reluctant to call in. First thing they said to me is, just don't use my name, which of course I won't do. And but they share this because they want to know what they saw, if anybody else saw it, that type of thing. And again, as I said before, for many it's life-changing.
Yeah.
If I can jump in there, Tim.
Yeah, please.
And share this with you.
Yeah.
When I first started researching, and this was back in 1980, when I first started reading the books and newspaper articles and reading Stan's cases from 1973 that were in the local newspapers, I really believe that this was an animal that just hasn't been discovered. And I'm still on that train of thought. I think it's an animal that hasn't been discovered. But reading the cases that Stan put out from the 70s, and he talked about some of those cases tonight, the UFO that landed in the field with the two Bigfoot walking along the fence, the woman who shot her 16-gauge shotgun out the back door at a creature that vanished, and then her son-in-law shot at five or six other creatures on the road. Reading about these cases, I thought, man, that's kind of strange. And I never really investigated cases like that when I was doing research from when I started back in 96 until just recently. And I started getting these one-off cases. And they're to the point where not every case I get is like that. I get them once in a while, but it really leaves you scratching your head thinking, what are we dealing with? Because a normal animal doesn't disappear right in front of your car.
Right.
A normal animal doesn't leave footprints in the woods that suddenly come to an end. And this is in snow. They don't suddenly come to an end and they don't go left or right or back step. They're just gone. Or there's situations that Stan and I have worked on cases together that he mentioned, where the person sees the Bigfoot walk across the road and it suddenly materializes. It doesn't just, come from left to right across the road and you see a full animal. It appears in the middle of the road and continues on its way. I can't say that it's interdimensional. I can't say it's an extraterrestrial. I have no explanation for it. But as I said, Stan's my mentor. We worked on a lot of cases together over the years, and I'm starting to see these strange correlations popping up. And it makes you wonder, what are we dealing with? I can't say, and I can't make that leap, that Bigfoot is interdimensional or is an extraterrestrial or has these strange attributes, but I'm seeing more and more of these cases, and I'm investigating more and more of these cases, and I'm talking to credible witnesses who are experiencing these things.
Yeah. Yeah, so interesting. So interesting. Okay, so last question here, and I'm going to throw it your way, Stan, and then I'll follow up with Eric and get his opinion on it as well. What is it about Pennsylvania that this activity, I don't want to say centers there, but that it's such a hotbed or a hub? What is it, Stan, about Pennsylvania that draws this activity?
Well, first of all, these cases are going on all over the country and many other parts of the world. We're getting similar reports. But going back historically, so you got to remember now, there's Native American accounts with Bigfoot for years and years. Of course, back in those days, they call it the wild man of the woods of the forest. And Eric, on his website, he has an amazing archive of newspaper accounts from the 1800s that talk about Bigfoot sightings throughout the United States and Pennsylvania. It's been going on for years and years. But so also you got to remember, my hotline has been open since 1969. And it was one of the only places you could call in the country that you could call and report it, and somebody would investigate these reports. So after all these years since 1969, now I take email reports and phone reports. My phone never stops ringing. It was one of the only places you could call and somebody would investigate the report. And that's why we had such a good source of data, because over the years I've accumulated many sources for information. And I'm also in touch with many researchers like Eric and many other researchers around the state. They're all getting reports. So we have a great input for information. We can't even imagine how much of this is going on that we don't hear about. Or people wait weeks, months, years, or never report these things. I run into that all the time. I'm sure Eric does as well.
Eric, why do you believe that Pennsylvania is such a hotbed of activity?
I wish I could answer that, but Stan's right. These cases don't just go back 10 or 20 years. They go back hundreds. I've documented, I've collected newspaper articles, as Stan mentioned, on the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society website that go back to the 1800s. I have a couple from the late 1700s. And the earliest documented Pennsylvania Bigfoot report occurred in 1836.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's not just a recent phenomenon, and it's not just one phenomenon that's going on in Pennsylvania. You've got so much strangeness going on in the state. What year was it, Stan? There was a reporter from Philadelphia that coined the phrase, Pennsylvania is what they call the Twilight Zone.
Well, yeah, Pennsylvania's Twilight Zone. That was done. The Philadelphia Inquirer did a major story on my research group in the investigation. They had a huge feature story. That was back in the 1980s. I don't remember exactly what year it was.
But yeah, it's been well known and well documented by Stan, by other researchers, even myself, that there's a strange phenomenon going on in Pennsylvania. We don't know the source of it. We don't know why these things occur or what causes these things to occur, but they just do. And Stan and I talk on the phone probably about once a week, twice a week, and we always bring up, and Stan brings this up all the time. Think about the reports that we do get, but how much is going on that we don't even hear about? Because at events that Stan and I lecture at or appear at, people come up to us and say, 10 years ago, I had this happen to me, or 5 years ago, I experienced this in the woods, and they don't tell people about it for years after they had that experience. So how much is really going on right now that we don't even know about?
One more theory. If they say the way to keep the names of the dead alive is to keep speaking their name, right? Could it be that if you keep the attention of Pennsylvania and that activity of the hotbed activity between UFO and Bigfoot, out there by going out, speaking about it, putting books out there, putting projects out there, putting camping trips out there. Is it the fact that you gentlemen are out there, making awareness out there, putting the awareness out there? Could it actually be keeping that activity alive partially?
Well, again, this has been going for years and years. There's so much people don't know. There's a lot of things we probably don't even talk about a lot because some of it is so strange or bizarre. We're reluctant to even talk about it, but there's patterns to it. And so many of the witnesses I interview give me those little patterns, those little details that people wouldn't know. And more of these things keep appearing now from different sources. And for many of these reports that we get from these people, it's the detail they give us, the patterns they tell us, the similarities from the other cases they can't be familiar with. And that's what's so intriguing. And one more thing I'll add, and I'll even close this out if you want to,
sure,
with this interview. There are many other cryptid cases I'm involved with, Eric's been involved with, from these huge giant thunderbird sightings to out-of-place black panthers to all weird leathery hairless creatures people are seeing, to winged humanoids, to, in my book, a gigantic spider, all kind of things. There are so many weird things going on. But I also found there's patterns to it with these other creatures being reported, and there's similarities and connections. So while you can have a Bigfoot sighting, for example, anywhere, there are certain geographical locations or properties where the phenomena seems to focus on. And some of these places have a long history of it. And, for example, back in 1979 to 81, 82, on the border of Westmore and Armstrong County, there was a major outbreak where something had fallen from the sky into a field one afternoon, and the locals began to hear screams and howls. They see orbs of light. They're finding strange footprints. They're having Bigfoot encounters. It increased more in 81 and 82. And at the same time they're having Bigfoot sightings, they have an outbreak of Black Panther sightings. So we're not talking about mountain lions or cougars. We're talking about black leopards or black jaguars, not common in this part of the world. And I found similarities with these cases. I told you about that amazing case in February 6th of 74 where the lady shot at the Bigfoot and it disappeared in a flash of light. Mm-hmm. So would you like me to tell you one short account that involves a Black Panther, which is similar?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So this is February of 83, way up in the mountains of southwestern Pennsylvania. It's early morning, around 1 o'clock in the morning. This guy's coming home. His car's overheating. He pulls into his driveway. He's putting antifreeze in his car. Short time later, he hears this loud growl behind him. He turns around to look. About 20 feet away, here's this big black house cat sitting there growling at him. Well, he's out in the country. There's a lot of cats around. He didn't think much about it. He goes back. He's putting more antifreeze in the car. A few minutes later, he hears a louder growl. He turns around. He couldn't believe what he's seeing. That big house cat has physically grown to twice its size. He throws the antifreeze can at it. It growls real loud and starts walking out the road, outside, up the road where it's all lit up. He runs into his house to get his pistol. He comes back out a few minutes later. He said, I thought I was losing my mind. I couldn't believe what I saw. He said, that big cat now looks like the animal I saw in the zoo. Looks like a great big Black Panther with that long swishy tail with glowing yellow eyes staring at me. He said, I took a shot at it. I don't know if I hit it, but moments later it disappeared, and that was the last you saw of it. Just vanished.
Whoa. Wow. Okay. That seems to be a common theme with a lot of these cryptids, isn't it? Just up and disappears.
Yeah, there's some strange stuff that goes on in our state. That's for sure.
But hey, it makes it a fun state, doesn't it?
It makes it interesting.
It does make it interesting. Stan's book is Creepy Cryptids and Strange UFO Encounters in Pennsylvania, Bigfoot, Thunderbirds, Mysteries of the Chestnut Ridge, and more. We have a link in the description of this program, so you can go get that book and many other of Stan's books. There, we'll have them all linked, so you can go get those as well. Eric's wonderful trip, which you'll be able to take this August. The Pennsylvania Bigfoot Camping Adventure proceeds go to charity. And he's got, again, name some of the guests that you have coming, including Stan, who will be there and be one of the honored guests who will be speaking there.
Yeah, Stan will be speaking. This is his 5th event. He's been at every one we've had. We've got Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, Lyle Blackburn, Ron Moorhead. We got Jeff and Willie from the TV show Mountain Monsters, Steve Culls, Ron Murphy, Mike Familant, Sean Forker. There's just so many people speaking. Jay Bachochin. You can find out more about it by going to our website. You can get tickets there as well. It's PA for Pennsylvania, short PA, BigfootCampingAdventure.com. And if you click on that, go to that link, it has information about our speakers, the special celebrity guests, the vendors. It has everything. Hotel accommodations if you don't camp or don't want to camp. Information about our night hikes. The charities are listed on there that we're donating to. And incidentally, last year's event, we raised almost $7,600 for the charities, thanks to people coming out and supporting the event. And that was after we paid all the expenses, of course.
Nice.
So net proceeds, we raised about $7,600. And I think over the past 5 years, we've raised close to maybe $16,000 or $17,000 for local area charities.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Again, we'll link up to the website so you can go check that out. And tickets are incredibly affordable, folks. So go out and meet all these wonderful people that, again, are educating you about what's out there in the great wild, and again, keeping you safe out there in the great wild as well. Eric, Stan, I want to thank you so much for being with us tonight on Darkness Radio. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us on. And I want to invite your guests to go to my website, which is stangordon.info, stangordon.info. There's a lot of cases on there. My contact information by email and phone is on the website as well.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Folks, a couple of notes before we leave you tonight. The Darkness Radio app is available right now on iOS. Again, it's an Apple app. If you haven't updated it, update it. If you don't have it, well, then go to the Apple Store and get it. Second, Darkness Radio Store. Go to darknessradioshow.com and check out the store. And third, if you're not watching this on video, it's the original Darkness Radio on YouTube. You can also link up at darknessradioshow.com. The executive producer of today's show is Troy Palmer. Troy, thank you for everything you do. Folks, have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next week. From Allie Fox, for Jessica Freeberg, and for Beer City Bruiser, I'm Tim Dennis. Thank you so much for tuning in to the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio.